Hello, wonderful sixth graders. I am beyond excited to present this lesson to you today. We are going to be reading a short story called The Terror, and I would want to say it's a fun story because it's not, but it's a really, really good story, and I really, really enjoy it, and I hope that you do too. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, the things you need to have out. You need a PDF copy of The Terror, notes, and a sheet of paper to write things down on, and then at the end you'll need your Microsoft form. Our agenda for today, we're going to do some pre-reading and background knowledge. We're going to read the text called The Terror, and then we're going to do a close read, and you'll take an exit ticket. Our objectives today, students will be able to analyze character motivations in a short work of fiction, and students will be able to analyze figurative language for meaning in a short work of fiction. Like I said, at the end, you'll be taking an exit ticket. So the first question that I have for you, how can fear stop you from accomplishing your goals? So go ahead and pause the video, and I want you to jot that down and think about maybe a time in your life where fear kept you back from something. So I know that in my life, sometimes change can be really scary. And so sometimes I avoid that change in order to keep things from happening that I don't, like I'm scared of the unknown. So that's my example of how fear can stop you from accomplishing your goals. And then the second question that I have for you is, how can fear motivate you to do better? Like I said in the previous slide, sometimes change can be scary, but at the same time, like I've learned in my life that when I embrace change and when I really face it head on, I end up growing as a person. And so even though change is scary, it's one of those things that I've learned how to face head on. And as a result, I feel like I've become a better person. So we're going to talk for a minute about characterization. This is something that we've talked about in my class before. Hopefully you remember those lessons. If not, that's okay. We're going to review it here. So direct characterization is over here. And this is when the narrator tells us about a character word for word. So the example here is, she was a cheery, always upbeat person. That tells me that this person is really happy, always in a positive mood. And it usually gives like generalizations. You can summarize someone's personality in a line. And it's useful for first details. It's concise. That person was funny. That person was nice. That person was kind. That's direct characterization. Indirect characterization, on the other hand, is when the author doesn't just tell us, but they show us. It requires you to make an inference about the character. I know I've told you this before. Indirect and inference go together. We take the combined details and then make those inferences. So what does the character do? What does the character say? How do they look? How do they act with other people? And it's useful to see how a character develops or changes throughout the text. So the character's deeds and words add up and gives us that growth that that character has from the beginning of this text to the end. When we're talking about indirect characterization, we often talk about the Steele method. This is something, again, we have talked about in class, but it's been a while. So Steele stands for what the character says, what the character thinks, what effect the character has on other people. So does this character make people angry? Does this character make people feel scared? Does this character make people feel loved? How the character acts, like what they're actually doing, and what the character looks like. They come in and they're slouched and they're looking at the ground, we might infer that they are insecure. they walk in tall and confident, we might infer that this person knows what they're doing. All right, let's talk about some of the key vocabulary words that we're going to need to know for reading this text. The first one is vulnerable. Vulnerable means susceptible to physical or emotional attack or harm. So I have a picture of a butterfly here, and my example sentence says the butterfly's wings are fragile and vulnerable to strong winds. So think about a butterfly flying along, right? If hurricane force winds suddenly come on, the butterfly is going to go, and it actually might damage the butterfly's wings. Therefore, we can know that vulnerable, if the wings are vulnerable, they could be easily damaged. An assailant is a person who physically attacks another. So in this picture, character B is the assailant because they are punching character A. So my sentence says, my dog thinks it is his duty to attack squirrels on our daily walks. He is a squirrel assailant. Irritable. Irritable is when you have the tendency to be easily annoyed or grumpy or angry. So I became irritable when I don't get enough sleep. Everything seems to make me angry. This is true of Ms. Tolson. But I've been getting lots of sleep lately, so that's not an issue today. Cowardice is a lack of bravery. You've probably heard the word coward before. We can actually see the word coward inside of the word cowardice. So cowardice is a lack of bravery, whereas someone who is a coward is someone who is not brave. So my cat showed cowardice when he saw a mouse. He ran away rather than trying to catch it. Now, my cats have never seen a mouse. Blaze, though, probably would run away from a mouse. Kira, on the other hand, she would attack it. She would eat that mouse. One thing you're going to notice is that there are lots of footnotes in this story. So here, when you see a number as you're reading, you know that when it's next to the word, it's going to give you the definition at the bottom. I want you guys to use this as you read to help you with some of those more difficult words. Now, there might be a difficult word or two in the text that is not given to you in the footnotes, and that's okay. In my class, you each have your dictionary and you know how to look up those words. You might not have a physical dictionary at your house, but that's okay. You're using your phone or your tablet or your computer to work on this assignment and watch this video. So one of the things that I really like in working at home or working on the computer is the ability to look up words really easily. So use Google Dictionary and just look up those words and see what they mean, and it'll help you understand some of those words in the text. All right, let's get started with reading The Terror. I got jumped at a pretty bad time in my life. Not that there's ever a good time. What I mean is that I was already deep in the vulnerability matrix. Okay, so here we have our first footnote. The vulnerability, we talked about what vulnerable means, right? So easily injured. Basically what this is meaning is that this person is at a time in his life where it's a really rough time and they're really easily get their feelings hurt, or it's just a really difficult period for them. I had just entered 7th grade, was at peak adolescent craziness, and to make matters worse was dealing with a new middle school whose dreary white middle-class bigotry was cutting the heart out of me. Okay, so dreary means like sad and depressing. Okay, so we know here that they just started a new middle school, and this person we can infer is a person of color, because bigotry means when people are prejudiced against you or think badly about you because of your beliefs or your race. So they're attending a mostly white school as a person of color. and having to deal with a lot of racism. And that racism, I'm going to change my color here, cutting the heart out of me. Now, we don't literally mean here, like, no one's actually like doing surgery and cutting his heart out. But what he means is having to deal with these like white racist kids is literally like really hurting him. So we're only 3 sentences in, and we have a lot of information here about our character, and we can make some of those inferences and indirect characterizations. I wasn't 2 periods into my first day before a classmate called me a sand, and I'm not going to say that word. This is another vocab word at the bottom, and basically it's he gets called a racial slur. So I'm going to start that sentence over. I wasn't 2 periods into my first day before a classmate called me a sand, and as if it was no big deal. Someone else asked me if my family ate dogs every day or only once in a while. By my 3rd month, that school had me feeling like the poorest, ugliest immigrant freak in the universe. I want you to think about how that feels to wake up every day knowing you have to go to school, and that's how you feel. Poor, ugly immigrant freak. Not just like the poorest, ugliest immigrant freak. So we have a really good sense of the emotional state of our character here. All right, so let's look at question 1 together. Question 1 says, in paragraph 2, the word peak means, and typically when I think of a peak, I think of like the top of a mountain, right? So if this is our little mountain, the peak is up here. So I noticed that one of our choices is the top of a mountain. However, when I look at my sentence, I had just entered 7th grade and was at peak adolescent craziness. This isn't talking about a mountain, so I know it can't be that. So what I'm going to want to do is plug these definitions into the sentence to see which one makes the most sense. Okay? So I just entered 7th grade. It was the highest point of adolescent craziness, the sharpest edge of adolescent craziness, or the crowning achievement of adolescent craziness. So that's how you're going to figure out the answer for question 1. My home life, let's go back to the story. My home life was equally trying. Trying means difficult. My father abandoned the family the year before, plunging our household into poverty or not having enough money. No sooner than that had happened, my brother, who was 1 year older and my best friend and protector, was found to have leukemia, the kind that in those days had a really nasty habit of killing you. Leukemia is a type of cancer. Specifically, it's the cancer of the blood. And so we know that he describes his older brother as his best friend, his protector, but now his older brother is sick with something that could kill him. One day, he was sprawled out on our front stoop in London Terrace holding court, and the next he was up in Newark, 40 pounds lighter and barely able to pee under his own power, looking as if he were one bad cold away from the grave. So we can infer here that his brother is really sick. I didn't know what to do with myself. I tried to be agreeable, to make friends, but that didn't work so hot. Mostly I just slouched in my seat, hating my clothes and my glasses and my face. Sometimes I wrote my brother letters, made it sound as if I were having a great time at school, a ball. So in this case, a ball does not mean like a soccer ball, it means like having a good time. So he's trying to make his brother think that he's doing okay, even though we, the reader, know he's really struggling with both things at school and at home. All right. Let's look at this. The author includes paragraph 3, most likely to show. So this is paragraph 3, the one that we just read. My home life was equally trying. We see that his father abandoned the family. His brother has leukemia, and his brother might die. Okay? So we have to consider not just one part of the paragraph, but the entire paragraph. We have to consider the entire paragraph. So this doesn't show me So why indicates the reason, right? Does this paragraph show us the reason his father left? No. How difficult this period of his life was? That his brother will likely die from cancer? Or how hard he worked to improve academically? Well, it doesn't say anything about him working hard to improve his grades. So we have to decide between B and C, okay? Make sure that you look at the entire paragraph before you answer this question and not just part of that paragraph. That's the only hint I will give you, but I bet you can figure it out between B and C. Okay, today's secret word is actually 2 words. It's brown bomber. Remember, the brown bomber is the car that they drive in Watson's Go to Birmingham? So the secret word is the brown bomber. Now, at this point, if you feel comfortable reading the rest of the story by yourself and then taking your exit ticket, go for it. I trust you. However, if you would like to continue reading the story with me, keep watching. I'm also going to walk you through the questions, and just like I have with the first 2, give you some hints on the questions to make sure that you know what to do for the exit ticket. Okay? All right, let's continue. And then came the beatdown. Not at school as I would have expected, but on the other side of the neighborhood. At the hands and feet of these 3 brothers I dimly knew. So dim means like, usually we think of the word dim as like how bright or not bright the lights are. So dim would be like the lights are not very bright. But he's not talking about the lights here. He's talking about that he didn't know these people very well. The youngest was my age, and on the day in question, we had a spat over something. A spat is an argument. I can't remember what. I do remember pushing him down hard onto the sidewalk and laughing about it, and the kid running off in tears, swearing he was going to kill me. Then the scene in my head jumps, and the next thing I know, the kid comes back with his 2 older brothers, and I'm getting my face punched in. The older brothers held me down and let the younger brother punch me all he wanted. I cried out for my brother, but he was in Beth Israel Hospital, saving no one. I remember one of the older ones saying, "Hit him in the teeth!" As these things go, it wasn't too bad. I didn't actually lose any teeth or break any limbs or misplace an eye. Afterward, I even managed to limp home. My mother was at the hospital, so no one noticed that I had gotten stomped. Even took my blackened eye to classes the next day. But because my assailants attended another school, I didn't have to tell the truth. I said, it happened in karate. So here, we know he got beaten pretty badly. He has a black eye, but he lies about it. He says it happens in karate. So we can make an inference that he is feeling what about the fact that he got beat up? You're probably thinking embarrassed or stressed or worried. All of those things would be true. Okay, how would you describe the relationship between Diaz, that's the author, and his brother? Use text evidence from paragraphs 3 through 5. So let's think about the things we know about his brother. He's older. He describes his brother as his best friend. He describes his brother as his protector. He describes his, like when he's in the middle of getting beat up, he calls out for his brother, and then he remembers his brother isn't there to save him. Okay, so these are some of the things that we're going to want to keep in mind as we're answering this question. I just gave you that text evidence. You need to finish that by turning that into at least 2 good sentences. How does Diaz's home life compare to his life at school? So what do we know about his life at school? We know that he gets called racial slurs. We know that he feels really overwhelmed. We know that he hates it, right? So school is hard. What do we know about his life as home? His father abandoned the family. They're really poor. His brother has cancer. So now that we know those things, let's look at some of our answer choices. The support he received at home made school bearable for him. Bearable means tolerable or okay. Does school sound okay to you? The challenges of his home life made it difficult for Diaz to succeed in school. This would mean, like, get good grades. Has he talked about his grades yet? I don't remember him talking about his grades yet. They were both challenging as he faced significant means important or a lot, as he faced significant obstacles at home and school. That could work. The unique obstacles that faced at home made him feel isolated from his peers. I know it's not that one. So between A, B, and C, I want you to pick what you think is the best answer. Let's keep reading. My first real beatdown, and I was furious and ashamed, but above all else, I was afraid. Afraid of my assailants, afraid they would corner me again, afraid of a second beatdown, afraid and afraid and afraid. Eventually, the bruises and the rage faded, but not the fear. The fear remained, with an awful withering dread that coiled around my bowels. That's like his, your bowels are your like intestines, so like he could feel the fear in his belly. That followed me into my dreams. Hit him in the teeth! I guess I should have told someone, but I was too humiliated. And besides, my number one confidant, my brother, wasn't available. A confidant is someone that you trust. So like, think about the person that like, when you have a problem, maybe you can't go to your parents about it. Maybe you go to a teacher, to a best friend, to an older brother or sister, whoever that person is that you go to, that is your confidant, okay? So I want you to notice something. Let's look at how many times he uses the word afraid. Afraid, 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 afraid. And then we don't have afraid again, but we have fear, fear, dread. What have I told you about when an author repeats themselves? That it's really important, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 words that mean afraid or fear in one paragraph. That should give you a pretty clear idea of how our character is feeling now. We have one more paragraph before the next slide. So I locked up the whole miserable affair deep inside. I thought that would help, but avoidance only seemed to give it more strength. Have you ever found that? Like when you have a problem and you're like, okay, I'm just going to ignore it and I'm not going to tell anyone. Even though like you're trying not to think about it, it like is always coming up, right? He's trying to push it down and it keeps coming back up. All right, let's keep reading. Without even thinking about it, I started doing everything I could to duck the brothers. I shunned their part of the neighborhood. That means he avoided it. I started looking around buildings to make sure the coast was clear. I stayed in the apartment a lot more, reading 3-4 books a week. And whenever I saw the brothers together or individually, in a car, on bike, on foot, the fear would spike through me so powerfully that I felt as though I was going to lose my mind. In Dune, a novel I adored those days, so he's talking about a book that he's read, Frank Herbert observes that fear is the mind killer. And let me tell you, my man knows what he speaks. When the brothers appeared, I could think of nothing. I would drop whatever I was doing and get away. And it was only later, after I calmed down, that I would realize what I had done. So he's like avoiding them, running away, looking around corners, trying to make sure that like anything and everything is like gonna be, so he can not see them because he doesn't want to get beat up again. The brothers didn't pursue me. They would jeer or yell at me and occasionally throw rocks, but even if they weren't chasing me in the flesh, they were sure chasing me in spirit. Ooh, that's a powerful sentence. Let's think about what that means. Even if they weren't chasing me in the flesh, so meaning even if they aren't actually chasing me, they're chasing me in spirit. And spirit means in his head and his thoughts. After these encounters, I would be a mess for days, depressed, irritable, hypervigilant. Hypervigilant means like always looking out. Ashamed. I hated these brothers from the bottom of my heart, but even more than them, I hated myself for my cowardice. Before that attack, I had fear plenty of times. Which poor immigrant kid hasn't? But after my beating, I became afraid. At any age, that is a dismal place to be. Dismal means a really bad place. All right, so let's look at question 5. How does Diaz change after the brothers beat him up? So we have already talked about this. He becomes afraid. And he starts looking around all the corners all the time. He avoids the neighborhood. He stays inside. All of these things. So let's look at our answer choices. He becomes more confident he could win future fights. Is that what you got out of that? Because that's not what I got out of that. He tries to focus on his brother's illness. He struggles with fear and stress more often. He focuses on how he can get revenge. Okay, so I crossed out this one. I am 100% confident that every single one of you can get this answer correct. You can totally get that right. I believe in you. All right, after this, it asks you a because, but, so. Let me remind you, because, so Diaz is afraid of the brothers because, that's the why. So tell me why he's afraid of the brothers. Diaz is afraid of the brothers, but what does he do instead? Diaz is afraid of the brothers, so what does he do next? Okay, so the reason why, and then but and so, make sure you give me different things for this. Some of you are still giving me the same sentence. You got to give me different sentences for your but and your so. All right, we're almost done. This is our last slide of the story. Are you enjoying the story so far? I hope so. I really love some of the language that they use in this story. Given all the other obstacles I was facing, my adolescence was never going to win any awards. But sometimes I like to think that if the beatdown didn't happen, I might have an easier time of it. Maybe a whole bunch of other awfulness would not have happened, but who can really know? In the end, the fear became another burden I had to shoulder, like having a sick brother or brown skin in a white school. Took me until I was a sophomore in high school. That's 10th grade. Yes, that long. So 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. So he's been dealing with this fear for 4 years. 4 long years. Before I finally found it in me to start facing my terror. By then, my older brother was in remission and wearing a wig to hide his baldness. Remission is when doctors cannot find any more cancer in your body. It doesn't mean that you're going to be forever well, but remission is the first step in like a cancer going away. So that's a really good sign. So we can tell his brother is getting better. Maybe his improbable survival was what gave me the courage, or maybe it was all the Robert Cormier I was reading. His young heroes were always asking themselves, do I dare disturb the universe? Before ultimately deciding that yes, they did dare. Whatever it was, one day I found myself fleeing from a sighting of the brothers, and suddenly I was brought up short by an appalling vision. Me running away from forever. Appalling means shocking or terrible. I forced myself to stop. I forced myself to turn toward them, and it felt as if the whole world was turning with me. I couldn't make myself walk toward them. I could barely even look at them, so I settled for standing still. As the brothers approached, the ground started tilting out from under me. One of them scowled. And then, without a word, they walked past. The end. Okay, let's focus on this last sentence. Without a word, they walked past. So do you think our narrator had to be scared for that long? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. All right, why does Diaz decide to face the brothers? He was tired of being afraid. He was no longer afraid of him. Okay, so it describes it as like the world felt like it was turning with me and I felt like the world was going to swallow me up. That doesn't sound like not afraid. He didn't think they would hurt him. He had nowhere else to turn to. I know you can get this question. From the author's experience, the reader can learn. Okay, so if this is something the reader can learn, this tells me that this is the theme. And we talked about the theme earlier this week. Theme is the life lesson. Fighting back is often the best solution to a conflict. Personal frustrations can surface in violent reactions. Sometimes the bravest move is standing your ground. Adults should intervene on behalf of bullied children. Well, it doesn't say anything about adults in here except for that his father left them. So I know that can't be the right answer. Okay, so between A, fighting back, B, personal frustrations, and C, the bravest move is standing your ground, pick what you think the best theme is. So now that we've gone through the story and now that we have gone through all the questions, it's time for you to take the exit ticket by yourself. Bravocado, you did it. Okay, I love this little GIF. It reminds me of Miss O because she loves avocados. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and as always, I love you. Be good. Have a wonderful day. Bye.